Good morning to everyone. The Committee on Office and Finance and Budget is hereby called to order. Before going into our formalities, I will be going to a recess. We're starting on time. However, Department Administration provided a PowerPoint presentation that now the legislature requires must be submitted 24 hours before we actually have the hearing. And the reason for that is pretty obvious, as you have seen throughout media reports, that there has been a number of cyber attacks on systems throughout the government. And so we must take every PowerPoint that's brought to us, emailed or thumb drive, and make sure that it's virus-free before we can upload it to our system. But the senators need that for the presentation, so I'll take a recess. Once we have 15 copies produced, we will reconvene this budget hearing with Department Administration. We are in recess. Mananasidus, Talu. The Committee on Finance and Government Operations has reconvened after a recess. For those just joining us, we recessed for a moment so that senators could receive the PowerPoint presentation by Department of Administration for their budget hearing. The legislature has a 24-hour requirement to clear any presentation and ensure that it is virus-free and able for usage electronically. However, senators do have this presentation and Department of Administration will be using it. So with that, senators, you have the presentation and I will begin the public hearing. First notice of this public hearing was disseminated to all senators and media outlets on May 4th, 2026, with its second notice disseminated on May 7th, 2026. These hearing notices were also made available on the Guam Legislature's website, our legislative calendar, and the Government of Guam's public notice portal. The committee will hear testimony in the following on the agenda. Bill number 266-38 COR, Committee on Rules by request to be Magaʹhågan Guåhan, the Governor of Guam, an act making appropriations for the operations of the executive branch of the Government of Guam for fiscal year ending September 30, 2027, making other appropriations and establishing miscellaneous and administrative provisions. The focus of this hearing this morning will be the FY Budget 2027 request for Department of Administration DOA. At this time, I'd like to welcome my colleagues who have joined us this morning. First of all, the Vice Chair and Vice Speaker of the 38th Guam Legislature, Senator Ada. Vice Speaker Ada, thank you for being with us. We also have Senator Sean Gumatauto, thank you for joining us. Senator Tello Taidagui, Senator Therese Chulai, and Senator Chris Barnett. Thank you, Senators, for joining us this morning. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone in attendance of the Legislature and Guåhan's general rules of conduct. Individuals testifying shall first be recognized by the chairperson before speaking and shall state their full name for record-keeping purposes. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance and the nature of the bill that is on the agenda. Personal inferences as to the character or motive of any senator testifying is not permitted. The chairperson of the committee may order the removal of from this hearing of any member of the Legislature in Guåhan public audience who fails to observe proper decorum pursuant to the 38th Guam Legislature standing rules. Any violation of this general rule of conduct will result in immediate removal from this public hearing room. With that, we will now proceed to hear testimony on Bill number 266-38 COR. I will now recognize the representatives from Department of Administration for their presentation and opening statement, but prior to that, I'll ask you all to rise and be sworn in by the Sergeant-at-Arms, as is the procedure in the 38th Guam Legislature when we're dealing with any financial matters. Sergeant-at-Arms, please.
Please raise your right hand. Under penalty of perjury, do you affirm that any and all information you provide today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Mr. Chair, under oath, you may proceed.
Sidusmasi, Sarge. Director Byrne, you are now recognized. If you would please either have your panel that is assisting you to introduce themselves, or you can introduce them and proceed with your presentation on your budget request.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Senators. With your consent, first of all, I'd like to have the panel introduce themselves. I'm Edward Byrne, Director of Administration. After that, I'd like to give some remarks, and then each member of the panel will address the information that you have in front of you. Thank you. So, starting from the right.
Tony Uggan, Personal Services Administrator.
Rena Borja, Deputy Director.
Adriana Kirigua, Acting Chief Procurement Officer.
Teresa Rivers, CFO.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and Senators, it is our privilege to be appearing before you to present the needs of the agency for fiscal 2027. Department of Administration is at the heart of government. DOA has to account for every dollar spent by government. DOA is tasked with ensuring compliance with laws, rules and regulations, not only within the agency, but also by every line agency. This task is not necessarily popular, but it is essential. Essential to maintain continuity of federal grants, essential to follow a path to a clean and issue-free audit, and essential because of you, the legislature and the public expects the government to operate both effectively and within the regulatory framework. This compliance role is often misunderstood by line agencies and their staff as necessary, hindering the mission and the performance of the agency, its delivery of services, its societal contribution. I would say to them, do not allow yourselves to confuse intention with good management. And senators, please consider the consequences of special exceptions legislation when none is needed. So that you have a deliberative process. Public hearings should expose all sides of a discussion and, most importantly, their consequences. Hasty course changes in late-night debate can produce unpredicted results. Equally well, reactionary defense of outdated or redundant practices have consequences. Simply because we're familiar with a process or application does not mean that it is automatically qualified for use, especially when there is new, improved software, hardware, and technology. We do not put aside technology in our private lives. Technology is our servant, not our master. Government staff and the people they serve will perform at a high level with these tools. Simply throwing people at a problem, or attempting to, does not necessarily work and usually is not the best solution. You may ask, why is this director raise these matters in his agency's budget meeting? Department of Administration needs its budget to address its requirements to achieve its goals, goals which are dynamic, flexible enough to address the issues right above, predictable enough to allow projects to be completed, valid enough to retain the confidence and commitment of staff, encouraging them to stay in government service. Monitoring performance and evaluation is an important aspect of retention and satisfaction. Adequate compensation for all employees, not just a few, will return the best result. Human relations. I will therefore start with this division of DOA. Fully staffing this division has been challenging. When employees come to DOA, they tend to stay. The task is persuading them to come. Our retention rate is good. DOA does, however, have a reputation for requiring hard work. We make no excuses for hard work, for getting the job done, for engaging the best to make this happen. The Deputy Director has done a good job in recruiting staff for this division. Recruiting them will improve agency recruitment itself. Fully staffed, HR can do everything that a professional HR department should do, not just parts of the job. There is a reason why trained, experienced professionals are the best people to carry out these tasks, achieving both compliance. There are many laws and regulations governing employment and compensation. We must be guided by them and comply, not just at the recruitment stage, but from recruitment to retirement. Staff should feel that their employer, the government, cares. Late evaluations, incomplete onboarding, unaddressed grievances, and erroneous records must be addressed. HR uses both personal attention and modern technology to achieve the correction of these errors. In the scale of non-compliance, human relation deviations rank high. People are our most valuable asset. HR must oversee performance at all levels. There is nothing worse, in my view, than dissatisfied employees. It is essential that we put the right people in the right job. HR can do this. HR will, with your help in the form of a budget for fully staffing this division. HR will reach into agencies, as other employers do, to make sure that this essential resource is preserved. Retentions cost less than recruitment. Investment in HR will stimulate this return. The job will get done timely, fully, and effectively. Please consider why staffing levels are patchy. We ask that you give us a budget in which potential employees will have confidence. Confidence the job will not be phased out next year or the year after. Confidence that there is a promise of a career in the civil service. Confidence that they will have access to tasks which will enable them to do their job well. In this endeavour, training is an essential factor. This is a joint task shared between HR and an agency. Specific training is an agency responsibility, but must have HR oversight. Just as important is general training, active shooter protection, safety instruction are examples. Sexual harassment training is mandatory. Most of all, training in how to supervise and manage is vital. For experience is only good if it's a good experience. Training encourages standards. Feedback from trainees will improve future training. This training section, often overlooked, needs adequate staffing also. The Personnel Services Administrator and some of his staff are here today to support his mission, and its staff will address this. Procurement. GSA has many tasks, and I will touch on some of these later, but by far the most important of these is procurement. Much has been said and written lately about procurement. Not all of it is on point. Procurement must be modernized, and we are using technology to do that. Process and thinking must be modernized also. We should not, however, forget that the main goals should be to acquire equipment, if that is what the procurement of, at the most equitable price. It must be fair to potential suppliers, for they are our resource. I learned long ago the importance of looking after vendors. It only makes sense. But this must not go too far. Business with the government is not a right, it's a commercial arrangement. Lack of vendors should not be considered a reason for sole source procurement, and above all, sole source procurement should not stifle innovation. GSA is committed to these joint principles of equity and efficiency. These goals must not be obfuscated by ambiguous specification. Such, in my opinion, are the greatest barriers to successful procurement. The effort for this must occur in the agencies. These employees who must be trained and how to write clear statements of requirements is an essential training task. This training is available from professional bodies such as NASPO, and DOA will make sure that it's available. Agencies must ensure that staff take this training and that the staff who are actually responsible for procurement act in a coordinated fashion. Procurement is too important to be passed down to most junior staff. Supervisors and directors must think responsibly. Compliance training is also important. Much of current training is concentrated on this. However, although I spoke earlier about the need for compliance, most vendors are rooted in commercial ways. They understand the roles of compliance. They relish a commercial excellence. Procurement is not a contest. Cooperation allows the best results. In this respect, I must address the provisions of Section 5150. As written, it encourages confrontation. Agreed, it has reduced the number of appeals, which is its goal. Now is the time to re-examine its provision and make necessary adjustment. DOA supports the bill introduced into the legislature to place a time limit for the Attorney General's review. That, of course, depends on the Attorney General recruiting and retaining attorneys who specialize in this area. Again, I recognize the importance of compliance. This section requires that the Attorney General confirms the form and legality of procurement. That should be the goal of Section 150 and no more, not a loose interpretation of it. It must be remembered that the procurement role in Guam requires life cycle cost evaluation, not just looking at the initial cost, but at the life cycle cost, which is only a sensible commercial principle, and GSA is committed to that. Procurement, and a significant amount of procurement occurs outside GSA, is not a chaotic and costly process as some have written and spoken about recently. It certainly needs review and modernization. The Model Procurement Code is currently being updated by the American Bar Association and the National Association of State Procurement Officers, and we should use this review for our own modernization. We should incorporate the best provisions into our statutes, but make local provisions for Guam conditions. We can work with standard products to minimize delivery times. The long supply chain that we're at the end of does work to our disadvantage, so we need to work on this, and GSA is doing so. You may have noticed that when certain online distributors do not want to ship, or because there is some difficulty in shipping to Guam, the website notes that it is out of stock. Diligence on our part and the part of GSA will ensure that we are not tarred with the same brush. And an example of this is the reluctance, or actually refusal, of shipping companies to put electric vehicles on their vessels. We currently have a grant for electric school buses, but we're having a hard time finding out how to get them delivered to Guam. So we're working on that, and we're trying to separate out the actual procurement of the product from the procurement of the transportation. As for other divisions, GSA needs to be fully staffed. The historical stigma and current workload will not impede our search for exceptional staff, and we request the budget to do just that. Insurance and benefits. This division is responsible for the self-funded health insurance plan. This plan has returned significant benefits to GovGuam employees, retirees, and their dependents. The goal is to provide healthcare access to providers and at the same time achieve a small surplus to keep the plan going. This goal was met in fiscal 2024. For fiscal 2027, the procurement has started. This time round, we're asking for separate bids for TPA services for medical, dental, and pharmacy. By separating out pharmacy, we can access maximum rebates on pharmaceutical purchases, which make up about 60% of healthcare costs. This arrangement also allows us to access EGWIP, which is the EGWP, Employer Group Waiver Plan, a subsidized drug plan for Medicare subscribers. You, the legislature, participate in the negotiations for the procurement of TPAs, with representatives of the Legislature and the Health Committee. We do renew our recommendation for a 3-year contract not currently permitted under current law, as we have been advised by our advisors that this will allow us better pricing. Claims are well controlled under professional medical guidance, and although we all know that Guam medical costs are higher than the national average, the increase in costs is running less than the national average, just over 4%, compared with the national average increase of 6%. DOA is also looking at other insurances, particularly the required insurance for buildings which have already been subject to FEMA damage reimbursement. This is important as we have 4 schools which will be fully paid next year and therefore will become government property. Risk management is an important task of any administration department, and DOA ranks this high in its priorities. Accounting and audit. I have saved the best for last, and by the best, I mean the best. This division accounts for over $1.3 billion in the general and special funds for local accounts and about $600 million in federal funds. The audited financial statements also incorporate the results of the component units totaling $1.2 billion in revenues and fiduciary plans, including the pension fund, with assets totaling $3 billion. $3.9 million in other funds and $13 million in charter school financials. The audit is a massive undertaking. We consistently achieve unmodified, clean audit reports. We are looking forward to the fiscal 25 audit, which for the first time, all records and supporting documentation for payment and procurement are contained within the new GFMIS system. Because of the complexity of some departmental payrolls, it took some time to transfer some agencies from the legacy system to the new system. This was finally achieved in November 2025. All payrolls are on the new system. As you will hear, accounting is responsible for recording and payment of all expenses of the 32 line agencies which it manages. Treasurer of Guam receives and reports all taxes and other revenues which are received by governmental funds, and payroll pays for about 3,500 employees every other week, with frequent demand runs to correct late or delayed payroll entries. Component units, UOG, GCC, GMH, GVB, the Judiciary and Legislature, and other smaller units receive their appropriations timely. DOA is well aware that these units rely upon their subsidies to function. The federal section draws down federal grants as timely as individual grants will permit. Accounting, as well as providing information each month to BBMR for compilation of the CRER, both general and special funds, has for several months provided and sent to agency directors budget actual expenditure reports, and for the last 2 months has also spent budget actual expenditure reports for our principal federal grants fund, which is, and it looks very similar to the local funds report. These new reports are designed to help agencies quickly identify areas of concern in local fund accounts and which federal grants are not being fully used. Plans are in place using the new system to improve interim reporting so that budget and forecast projections can be based on these rather than waiting for audit completion. The origin of the word audit goes back to 1435 and derives from the Latin word audire, to listen. Double-entry bookkeeping was first used in the year 1300. Our modern systems follow these very same principles, GFMIS is a full double-entry set of programs. Our processes are much more complex and require more than ledgers and quills. We need qualified accountants to use the system and to ensure timely and understandable reporting. This need, and we are in contact with UOG and GCC so they understand our need, is applicable to both accountants at DOA and at the firms that audit our books. Each of us recognizes that the need is not well filled. Accountants, skilled accountants, are scarce worldwide. So we must look to technology to fill in the gaps. We have made significant progress in implementing and using new technology. We have a largely paperless system, and we intend to keep it that way. It is surely no secret that our relationship with our auditors needs repair. We have engaged in full and frank discussions with Ernst & Young over the last few days. We must recognize that a finding reported in fiscal 24 may recur in fiscal 25, since it cannot be addressed until fiscal 26 or even fiscal 27. Without going too far into the complex array of audit reports, as it is understood that the legislature intends to go in this matter in another way, I would add that the audit reports recommend changes in the way government operates. I would insist that there must be changes in the way that the audit is conducted. Auditors must appreciate that the technology is there to help us and them. Face-to-face communication will usually elicit a much better and complete understanding of a process than a lengthy exchange of emails. Expertise does not exist only on one side. DOA employees take pride in what they do. If an error is made, we find it and we fix it. And we expect operating agencies to follow policy and comply with rules and regulations. No matter how urgent or necessary a service or item of equipment is or seems to be, process must be followed or a deviation will occur. Everyone inside government, no matter which branch they serve, should follow that principle. If agency managers do not understand the process, they should ask. If auditors have questions, let them consider and ask for explanations once or maybe twice, but not return multiple times with multiple questions. I was expected to do this when I was being trained at Deloitte. I expect no less. It is said that we get the politicians we deserve. We deserve professional, cooperative audits, respecting DOA employees who are people trying to do their job in the face of many pressures. I am confident that the discussions which we have had over the last few days will deliver. Internal control is crucial. Interpersonal courtesy, indispensable. I will now ask the DOA Deputy Director to take you through some of the presentation which you have in front of you. It's insight into our operations, duties, responsibilities, achievements, and concerns. After this, I may offer a summary of the essential points, and we certainly welcome and look forward to your questions. Thank you for your attention. The staff at DOA, from the bottom to the top, are grateful. Some of them are seated here behind me today, or on the side. I commend them for their work, their patience, and their grace. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Susmasi, Director Ed Byrne, but prior to going to the presentation, I must address your commentary, and we need that for the record, of course, to be submitted.
Yes.
Yeah, Director Byrne, we will be absolutely going through an investigation as well as additional hearings coming forward with Department Administration as well as the Public Auditor to get to the bottom of everything. And so you can look forward to that, and we will use your presentation as a guideline as well going forward. I think that this committee, as well as this legislature, has been nothing but open. Nothing but open and nothing but transparent in terms of being patient, patiently waiting for audits to come out. And we have had a number of hearings, and that's why I'm going to mention once again to our senators that we are here to discuss this document, which is your budget that has a modest variance of approximately a little over $1 million in order to be able to move forward. But senators can look forward to plenty of time to go over Department Administration, the audit with the Public Auditor, as well as Department Administration. And we also join in thanking the employees and the hardworking individuals that are tasked with this duty and
Thank you, Mr.
responsibility going forward. So we will now move to the presentation. Please proceed.
Rena Borja, Deputy Director. I think before you have our presentation on the priorities for 2026, 2027 that we would like to do. First off, we'd like to improve our financial monitoring tools with the introduction of budget to actual, which we have been doing, and we've been giving to the line agencies and having them review what they have monthly and year to date so they can monitor it throughout the year, the fiscal year. We are pursuing enabling the direct debit, the ACH pool for tax payments to support DRT for the tax collection. We are finalizing financial statements capability to ensure timely provision of financial statements for annual budget reviews and to meet audit guidelines. We are also looking at completing migration of all agencies, semi-autonomous agencies to paperless payroll system, which we, the last line agency was that we put was GPD onto the new system, and the paperless. So remember, we had all the timesheets and whatnot. We're going into where we don't have to have all of those pieces of paper. We can cut down paper. We can cut down storage. So that's where we would like to be able to get to. That's one of our priorities. We want to implement AI-driven recruitment application, evaluation, and paperless interview notification. We now have applications for Guam employment online. And from there, we are actually this week, we are meeting with our vendors to bring in where we have evaluations done online. It's not by our staff. They will monitor. They are looking and reviewing those, but it'll be faster to now rate the applications. And so I believe we may have had like 2,000 applications. We have how many positions open? If you go to our website, we probably have 40-some to 50-some open announcements. And we are working on trying to get those announcements as fast as we get them out, go to the recruitment process and continue the process where the comment that it would take a year to get employed by Guam, we're hoping that really changes to 2 to 3 months, because there are steps that we have to go through to make sure, back to what the director said, we hire the right people for the government, that are employees that we want to keep, and that we train them and that we hire the best for the government. The centralization of the procurement enhancement, compliance, standardization, and purchasing effectiveness across departments. We are also looking at, we're adding this into the GFMIS system. The vendors are here. We are working on the procurement module. So there's a few modules that we're going to be working on this week and hope to roll them out in phases so that our staff are not overwhelmed in doing all of this at one time, but we have deadlines on things that we want to do to get them on the GFMS system. Which brings me to the, this is also, we want to modernize the surplus property and inventory management through establishment of tracking systems, increase reuse and how the staff here can talk to the agencies and be able to get information faster. We talked about now everybody does emails, and sometimes I think they lose the fact that we need to speak to each other once in a while and not just through email. This technology, I think, sometimes gets a little, takes out some of the people power in doing things together. We also want a better utilization of our GFMIS system with a focus on resolving issues flagged on the user's request, and implement better progress during of the remaining modules and for the next year or so that we want to implement certain things. We are also looking at the multi-year contracting for the third-party administrators. As the director mentioned, the issuance of the life insurance RFP, our insurance group is very working very hard to make sure that all of these things are done, and that the change in statute to increase the basic 10K life insurance that they get, I think it's been quite a while, and that needs to be looked at as far as how we all rates go up, and I think that's one thing that she is looking at, trying to make sure that we get on with that. We optimize the medical enrollment for Medicare eligible and non-Medicare eligible subscribers. So I think there's 20-some thousand employees of Guam that are being serviced by that. As procurement workload begins to grow, we are trying to make sure that we have adequate resources. We have just gotten a buyer supervisor promoted. We need a couple more buyers to be able to, the workload that they have, they're very diligent, but we do need to have more assistance in that area. We want to achieve unified digital records management system so that data is kept. We don't have all these pieces of paper and GSA that's been there for, I think, 50 years. But all these reports that we would like to be able to electronically digitize them so that we have information at our fingertips instead of looking for paper all over the place. We are also having continued management of federal funds. We are also doing that with another grants module so that we have information, additional information is there, justification of the expenditures, and we also will have restricted access. It's just not anybody that can go in and look at these. Continued efforts to support the line agencies to better management, their whole process, their payments, their procurement, and their recruitment process. We do assist them with information, and if we need to send an EEO, if we need to send, help them with their questions when they're doing their interviews. We are also very cognizant of the timely and accurate reporting from the agencies regarding their insurance enrollment, terminations, and payments. And it's our area there, or downstairs, where it's convenient for people, the seniors, people in wheelchair, to come in to ask about their benefits. And we're trying to get a little bit more room there so that if you're coming in, you're a widow, whatever, and you don't want everybody to hear the information, so we're trying to segregate so that they have a little privacy when they come in and talk to us about things like that. The centralization of the insurance processing of the defined contribution for the retirees and survivors. We definitely want to look at the senior staff and the succession plan because we have people that are going to be retiring. I think that's ever in the government, but especially in DOA and all the line agencies that we support, if we have people that are going to be retiring, I think since I've been there, we've had like 4 or 5 retired. We anticipate more will be retiring by the end of the fiscal year or even the end of the year. And that's a lot of knowledge that is not going to be there. And so we would like to able to have plan A, B, and C to be able to have people to step into these roles and train alongside of them before they retire. The availability of qualified and experienced professionals for the specialized role, especially to ensure that DOA has best qualified people. As even the public auditor, EY, and ourselves, we do know that there's a shortage of accountants. There are accountants being churned out of UOG. We do have people that have applied, and there's quite a few, but one of the things that we're looking at is making sure that we hire the right staff. So we don't have, and I'm not saying anything against what we have currently for our accounting group, but as things change and all these requirements for accounting comes up, we want to be able to get staff that have the background, not necessarily just promote from within, but try to get, I don't want to say new blood, but other ways of looking, things that they may come from the public sector, private sector. So that's one thing that we're looking at when we look at recruitment. I'm not going to talk about this. Our CFO is going to talk about the next slide.
Teresa Rivers. The next slide is what you would be familiar with. This was presented or provided in a CRER. This gives you a summary of all the revenues generated for the general fund up to the first half of 2026, which is up to March. You can see the total revenues. And one of the reasons why we wanted to put this slide here also because our TOG cashiers, these are the folks that are actually collecting all of this revenue aside from what's received over the internet, over the DRT site. The bulk of the revenues are collected at the TOG offices. So we want to touch on that, and I know that we're still tracking, as you can see in total, comparing 2026 to 2025 for the month of March. We generated 88, or tax collected, 88 million versus 87 in 2025. And in year-to-date, fiscal year-to-date, the total that's collected up to March, you're looking at 557 million versus 546 million in 2025. So there is a 11 million increase compared to 2025. However, you are going to start to see that starting to slow down. As you can see, the gross receipts tax, given the 4.5% tax rate reduction, that's going to start to come down. So that is one of the key lines that we monitor, and we put some commentaries when we provide the report to PBMR before it's presented. So we wanted to share that with the group. The next slide talks about...
Can we just qualify this though also? Because I want to make sure that this is in the reconciliation. We did have the downtime with regard to Department of Revenue Tax, unable to process. And so I think the better picture will be definitely the April representation.
Correct. That's correct. Thank you for confirming that. We also wanted to share with you, I know you also received this report as part of the CRER, but that's a summary of the first half or the year-to-date expenditures from the general fund as of March. So that's the list of all the agencies, including some of the semi-autonomous and autonomous, some of the transfers to the autonomous agencies. You're looking at the total appropriation or the total budget for 2026 of 1 billion. And year to date, based on March, 6 months, the total spent is 506 million. So that leaves half of that to be spent over 2020 for the remaining 6 months. So what we encourage the agencies is to utilize and monitor their budget when we send them the budget versus actuals report, so they are spending what they were given to spend towards the end of the year. There are challenges with requests to roll over or to carry over, but we've clarified that in multiple times that it's a challenge and it'll be hard for them to request to carry over funds. They need to spend what's been given the end of the year. So we're working closely with the agencies. We have had meetings with some of the line agencies to help them better understand and flag spending or lines that are not spent. There are some that up to 6 months we haven't seen any expenditures. So we either check if the invoices are sitting somewhere or they're just, the budget appropriation wasn't correctly aligned. So the reports that we're sending them monthly is helping them and us better manage the financials. So we wanted to also show that this is, as you can see, to manage or monitor $1 billion in just the general fund alone. This does not include the 101 or the federal financials. So to manage this, we only have our budget. If you look at what we're asking, the Department of Administration that's kind of responsible for, which is the engine of the government, is actually only asking for 13, and we're increasing our ask to 14 million to manage this 1 billion budget. So we kind of want to bring that to perspective to help us, justify our ask for the 2027 budget. And those are the financial ends. And then the next slide leads us right into our request, our budget request. So we, after our meeting with OFB, we did review and we made some additionals. You can see that in the last, last 4 columns. So our original ask was 13.5 for 2027. We actually did not factor in new staff that we need to manage to support the operations for the government. So we have asked for an additional 750. And that includes just 40,000 in operational cost. So our ask has increased from 13.5 to just 14.3 million, which is kind of similar to what we were asking for last year. So again, if we could request our leaders today for your kind consideration, given that we've kind of presented you a budget or the operations and the financials that we are expected to manage. Also, we don't have specific people in Division of Accounts to purely focus on audit, and it becomes an ongoing activity for us. We don't have those resources. We are using the current resources right now that manages all of this to also coordinate the audit. So just trying to bring all of those into perspective for today's conversation. And then the last slide we have in front of you gives you the volumes year to date. So this is just the key activities. It doesn't include other sections, but we wanted to kind of map this to the financials that we provided earlier. So if you look at the Treasurer of Guam, all of the locations of Treasurer of Guam across Guam for the first half of 2026, those are the volumes they manage. 267,000 collections to the value of 493 million. And that is all of the fees, all of the cash, all of the checks, everything that they receive in these locations. And for Division of Accounts and which TSA, those are the payments to date for the first 6 months and the value. 42 million in invoices, 41.6 million in invoice and direct payments to the value of 558 million. That value, this number does not include, it also includes invoices paid out of the Fund 101 or federal funds. And then there's about 1,100 requisitions to the value of 33 million and purchase orders received and processed 1,800 to the value of 32 million. So those are just the key activities we wanted to share with you, our leaders today, and to also provide support our requests for funding for 2027.
Excuse Masi. Just for perspective, before we go to question and answer of our colleagues, in the fiscal year 2026 budget, we adopted the entirety of the governor's request, $1.35+ billion. Currently, so when we talk about the impact of taxes, currently we are tracking 58 million in excess revenue. So the story here is when we talk about impact, we adopted the entirety of the governor's budget. There was no reduction, although we did the BPT rollback, and we're still performing at $58 million excess revenue. As you see in your, also in your slide here, very clear and easy to see, the cumulative is performing at a almost 11 million better over all of the tax categories. When we had our budget hearing, our session a couple months ago, this is what Director Byrne and I went over. At least currently, the other performing categories is an awash between BPT and other revenues. So thank you very much for that. I will now go to Senator Sean Gumatauta for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to DOA for being with us today. I'm just going to jump right in it. Recognizing that public safety and law enforcement departments confirmed during their respective oversight hearings these past few months that they were prohibited from accessing unexpended FY2025 appropriations, did DOA encumber or expend any portion of its $967,251 in lapsed general fund appropriations and any other unused FY2025 appropriations reported as of September 30, 2025?
No, sir. And if I could just add, the law enforcement agencies, all of them are currently underspending their current budgets. So I don't really know how they look at their budgets in this kind of skewed way, but the important thing is to spend a current budget and not look back to a previous year's budget without asking themselves, why didn't we spend it last year?
All right, thank you, Mr. Byrne. Let me just talk a little bit about the recruitment of public safety officers. So in the FY 2025 budget, this is Public Law 37-125, there was an appropriation from the general fund of $794,000 for firefighter recruits. The GFD had an unexpended balance of $181,467 from this appropriation as of September 30, 2025. Then GFD received an additional $794,000 for firefighter recruits through Public Law 37-135. The department did not use a single penny of that supplemental funding. At the end of FY 2025, DOC had $1.1 million available from funding appropriated for correction officer recruits at the end of the fiscal year, and GPD, they were appropriated just over $1,085,000 and an additional $361,000, totaling over $1.4 million for police officer recruits in FY 2025. However, GPD was unable to spend $1 million by September 30, 2025. Recognizing that the recruitment process for many years has been described by public safety and law enforcement leadership and multiple other agencies as a rather lengthy experience, and as was further expounded on by the Deputy Director, how can DOA specifically expedite or otherwise improve the current onboarding of public safety and law enforcement officers? And we heard a little bit today about there could be some way in technology to help, but acknowledging that many resources have been prioritized by this branch of government in the current and prior fiscal year for the recruitment of these critical positions. Any way we can expedite this?
All right, thank you, Senators. Currently, Currently, right now, there is a process to recruit law enforcement personnel. I will however, say that it is extremely critical that we onboard and we screen these personnel very thoroughly. So in my experience, onboarding of law enforcement personnel may not be the most expeditious, but again, thoroughness is actually at the top priority. There are a few methods we can explore to expedite the more administrative, but not the security. Again, the administrative processes of onboarding these folks, we can still make some improvement, but as far as the security review, that I don't believe that could be rushed. And just as a note, the administrative onboarding of the law enforcement personnel is, in my opinion, the least cumbersome. In essence, it's merely filling out a few papers, packets. It's going through an orientation review and a few trainings, right? So a few mandatory trainings, but nothing too elaborate. Not on the administrative side. On the security side, my understanding is that that is a lengthy process. In other words, it encumbers polygraph tests, a federal national background check. Again, I think polygraph, as I mentioned that, but also personality test, and psychological test. Right. So those are actually the bulk. The bulk of the onboarding process for law enforcement personnel is the security and the background of each individual. And mind you, it's not a matter of like 10 or 15. Sometimes we have, historically we've had like 75 personnel being onboarded at the same time from multiple academies. That in itself takes time. And so, and the other facet is the fact that they must be onboarded at the same time because of the academy. The academy all starts at the same time in the same classroom. We're not able to break them up and staggeringly, bring them in. So as far as speeding up the process, again, administratively, we can explore to expedite that process.
Yeah, I think as they're watching, I think that expediting means faster than today. I get the security parts. Not here to beat you up on that. But when it comes to the part that you can control, that's what they've been talking about throughout all of our pre-budget meetings and budget meetings, is how can we get this process quicker, because the people of this community want to ensure that they're safe. Let me just stay with that if I could, Mr. Chair. Expanding on our earlier discussions, including the legislature's February 20th oversight hearing for the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission and a March 2026 oversight hearing with the OPA and DOA, and in our broader effort to avoid inconsistencies and potentially costly piecemeal policies, to what extent is DOA's HR division engaged with the Post Commission on the development of a general force structure plan, recognizing that the Post Commission has taken some steps to review all of the law enforcement positions in the government of Guam through their subcommittees, which are reviewing approximately 77 positions, including their respective position description questionnaires?
Thank you for the question. So we do have several requests from several agencies, most notably Customs and Corrections. We just recently, a year and a half ago, restructured the police officer series. And so now currently, there is a new job specification with new qualification requirements that enables more flexibility into progressing their specific job series. We are currently exploring Customs and Corrections as well. We do have a request. We received one just recently for Corrections, and a few months ago, Customs. The challenge, though, is of course aligning the law enforcement personnel and their positions and their ranks. And I'm very familiar with the force structure concept. But of course, there is that diversity of ranks and personnel within each law enforcement group. As an example, police officers of the police GPD, they do have a few hundred, as opposed to Territorial Park, which they only have, 4 or 5 personnel, as well as conservation folks. So they don't have the same number of personnel, which also in turn means they don't have the same number of ranks. And so getting those aligned so that there's parity within the force structure, is still open. It's still a conversation that we're exploring on the HR side. We do have other things to contend with. In other words, lateral transfers, reemployment. Of course, the pay scale moves, and so we do have reemployment personnel coming in several years after the fact, and migrating them back into the workforce is challenging. So there is conversation. Although we don't have those conversations at the post commission, we do have requests, and we are exploring those conversations administratively within our office and between the posts. So we are actively engaging with them.
I'm a little disappointed on the answer. How many HR staff are actually dedicated to public safety officers in this community?
I'm sorry, one more time?
How many HR personnel are dedicated to processing the requests from our public safety agencies?
For the force structure request?
How many HR personnel are dedicated to ensuring that our public safety agencies are hiring and doing their part?
So for the classification section, we do have not dedicated, and unfortunately the person is not dedicated. We only have 4 people. Of the 4 people, 2 are relatively new. The one senior staff member, has been engaged and is communicating with the agencies.
So, Mr. Byrne, are we saying that we have only 4 personnel to the entire government of Guam that's dedicated to HR?
No, Senator. The deputy will take you through the listing.
No, we don't. We have more of that in the recruitment process, in the recruitment department. So there's the group in the recruitment department, there's 3 PS2s and 1 PS1, 2 PS1s. We have the assistant PSA, the PSA. We have a PS4, 2 of them that are helping in the recruitment process. I guess the question you're asking is, do we have 1 dedicated, 2 dedicated, 3 dedicated? We don't have dedicated HR person to strictly do GPD, for example. They are all experienced. They have the training, and we're continually training to have them to be all exposed. I find that it's hard to have 1 person who's dedicated to doing law enforcement, because that can lead to tunnel vision, subjective. So they're all trained that they're able to step in and cover for each other in this recruitment process. So I think at the beginning of the year when we had like a recruitment for the fire department, I believe there must have been 200 applications for 20 positions. So the 200, and this is just an example of how it goes. The 200 applications come in. They all have to be rated. They take the exam, then they're, the written exam, then they have the physical exam. So all those timing and the setting up of when it's going to happen, and it requires involvement of the recruitment staff, and sometimes we get it from the other departments within HR to help out. So I think your question, sir, is that how many people are just dedicated to that? They're all dedicated to being able to do the different law enforcement. And law enforcement, we are also very much working with the chiefs of all 4 branches, 5, to structure the written exam, because those written exams are like 30, 40 years old. I've gotten the chiefs to be involved so that they can look at the national standards, And there are several of those websites that they do. And then just using GFD as an example, we looked at what it is that he wants to be included in this exam and the weights, okay? So those are things that we're working with, improving. So back to the question of how many people and how long and all that, we're really working hard to improve this, to be able to have people, not just one person dedicated to one agency. That's really should not be the way it should be done. We have HR.
Oh, no, and I'm not even implying that. I think it's a priority of this government to get these law enforcement guys on as fast as I can. Now, let me just go take this a step further. Will it make sense to do a haste study only for law enforcement to make sure that they're all taken care of and we compensate them correctly?
You want to answer that?
Thank you, sir, for your question. So, with the law enforcement, as you know, a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, we did upgrade the pay scale for the law enforcement. We just recently, last year, upgraded the GPD pay scale very generously. We do have in hand a proposal for the other law enforcement personnel. And so we are actually on track to upgrade the last law enforcement pay scale. We are on track. In fact, we're ahead of the schedule because, again, we updated GPDs. And so at this time, I don't see another haste study contract or effort that's necessary because, again, we do have a schedule that we're trying to keep to in updating all the pay scales, which includes the law enforcement.
Again, goes back to the ability of our government to be able to support them. That's why I'm asking if there's any alternative we could consider.
Well, the deputy started to explain about the new technology, and I'll ask her to expand on that. That we're trying to roll out. I think it's the end of this month, which relies upon much more computer assessment than individuals. To pick up your point about who should be dealing with this, we certainly don't just want one person dedicated. For if that one person isn't there, the whole process stops.
Oh, no, I'm talking about a team of people.
Right.
There's no I in team, so I'm trying to figure that out.
Right. On Friday, got a letter from the chief of police about his recruitments, and we will process that as quickly as we can, but I only got it on Friday.
Okay, Mr. Burnett,
Can I get the deputy to talk a little bit about the new technology?
So the recruitment module that we're going to be implementing as we're sitting here, our contractors are here, the vendors are here to go over that with us. It will actually take the application and take what they filled out and resume and whatnot, and that particular system that we're implementing will take what usually would take us. You have all these applications, you take them, and you're going to rate them, and if you're and it may take, what would normally take to rate one application could take 4 hours, okay? So one application is 4 hours, and how many applications? We get 200 applications for, let's say, GPD. That takes a while for all those 200 to be done. So with this system, it feeds in and it reads off the application, it reads off the resumes and all the information, and then takes what is required for that position, and it'll spit it out in minutes on what these ratings are going to be, and that will move on along. And so that's the process we're working on this end of this month. It's going to go live. And so that will speed up that process of recruitment, and all the staff in recruitment will know how to use that.
That's a big promise. We'll have to check you on that. I only have one question, Mr. Chair. I heard, Mr. Byrne, you said there's a surplus in our self-insurance plan. Did I hear that right?
It's in the audit. There's a surplus of just over $6 million.
Okay. Is any of that going back to our employees?
Well, the whole idea is to have a buffer so that in the course of a year, because claims and subscriptions revenues don't necessarily match, that we have a buffer in order to make sure that we don't exceed our cash reserves. the actual revenues are something around about 200 million. So 6 million is not going to be a big amount, even if we did decide to return it.
Let me just ask one question on the TPA, Mr. Chair, because I'm running out of time. So what was the total amount appropriated for reinsurance or stop-loss coverage in FY 2024 and FY 2025? I brought this up in an oversight hearing.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
What was the total amount appropriated for reinsurance or stop-loss coverage in FY 24 and FY 25?
The amount that we pay is about 5 million. It's actually decreased as we've gone through this process because experience has reduced the premium because we've only had no more than 3 claims in any 1 year.
So where are we going to find this budget item for these reinsurance premiums? Where do we see it?
It's within the self-insurance. It's like a claim. It's a cost of the insurance.
So who at DOA has the authority to obligate these millions in reinsurance spending?
The actual process is currently done by the TPA because we can't. We, the government, cannot access the secondary insurance market. We are looking at that. We are thinking of setting up a captive so that we can access the secondary insurance market, but we're not in a position to do that now.
So my final question is, are you guys meeting the goals of the self-funding of insurance? Is it working out?
Yes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Byrne, and thank you, DOA. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the time.
Senator Sean Gumatauta. Senator Talataitigui, you recognize 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning to my colleagues. Of course, good morning to the heart of the people working at DOA. You guys doing the best you can with what little you have, and we get hacked every once in a while, through the internet servers. We're looking at, shutting down certain areas. So it's a concern. So how much of your budget that you're requesting are actually put to ensuring the safety and well-being of DOA? And you can also elaborate on if your data and information is used on the cloud or is it with OTEC? And you can also please talk about, since we're in this, well, let me just let you answer that question. Okay.
Yes, I can address some of the points you made. That the actual budget for cybersecurity is with Homeland and OTEC, not with us. The GFMIS system is in the cloud. It's a Microsoft system and therefore benefits from Microsoft's own practices for making sure that full goals of cybersecurity are achieved. And our service has not been interrupted because of cybersecurity issues. One of the interruptions that we do encounter is we're within the government internet ring and we access the system through that ring. So if that's compromised, we would be in difficulty, but I don't believe that we've been down for more than about 35 minutes over the last year.
So you weren't affected in that last attack on they call themselves the Lord of Darkness. You were not.
No, we weren't affected, other than our interchange with other government agencies that were affected.
It sounds good that you're doing every precaution, but remember once upon a time, even before technology's even gotten better at going through these what they call holes, in cybersecurity where they can infiltrate. This latest one that's international, it also brings an opportunity for the bad actors, even the ones who are not that good at hacking, to be able to infiltrate. So it's so important to save that, because I was one of those back in about 8 years ago when they took a lot of the information, our social security number, date of birth, everything like that. Many of us were hit taking, what is that?
Yes, unfortunately,
identity
there's some
theft.
very large corporations that have had data compromised, and they've had to provide access to credit ratings and things like that out of their own funds because that might have been compromised. But we take every precaution we can.
Yeah, and the funding that I think was 1.6 or 1.8, that was actually, there was a hack that came in, but you were able to recover that funding. Was
Yes.
it 1.8 or 1.6 million when it was judiciary and DOA?
It was two. The total was 1.8.
Total was 1.8, and you recovered that, no problem.
We're still trying to make sure that we get the full amount.
Okay, so you haven't recovered the full amount
We
yet?
haven't recovered the full amount. No.
Okay, because the media says that you have recovered it. So how much of it that you have not been able to recover?
I think we've recovered about $1 million, but I'd have to check because it was a while
So
ago.
far, you recovered
Right.
about $1 million?
And we're engaging the FBI on this trace process.
Yeah, FBI, Homeland Security, let's just keep them all in
Yes,
the mood, yeah.
absolutely. But the origin of this was not with us. It was, unfortunately, with the judiciary. But
Yep,
it
judiciary.
impacted us, yes.
Okay. Mr. Byrne, now that we talked about the cyber, because that's the way to go. I mean, I'm glad to hear that you're going to integrate AI systems to help, augment the shortfalls that you have. That's good. We're not looking at, displacing employees. We're looking at just enhancing the areas that you fall short. And I mean, everybody's into speed. They want instant everything. Doesn't work that way when you don't have a lot of staff to help you. One of the biggest loopholes, I guess not loopholes, but one of the biggest hurdles that we have for every government of Guam agency is procurement. And so tell me about the procurement and what are you doing? How many employees do you have there? How many are you looking at bringing in? And I know Andy has been the acting CPO for a while now. Is she planning on being no longer active, but the Chief Procurement Officer? So can you give me a little bit more on that? And what are you going to do on retention? Because I do know that many of this job in procurement is very difficult. And how are you going to keep them there? Or are there any increase in salary so that they're not leaving for other agencies with better pay?
May I ask Andy to address it, in particular, her approach?
Hi, Adriana or Andy, GSA. So right now, I do have a makeup of 4 buyers and 1 buyer supervisor in procurement. We are waiting on a certification list from HR for our buyer 1 positions. And I was updated last week that we have a buyer 2 position that is out there if anyone would like to apply. So I've been lucky enough for the time that I have been there that I have not lost my buyers. They have been committed to the mission of GSA, and I hope they continue to stay and like the work that we do. We are doing a lot of efficiencies right now. Every buyer is assigned to agencies. Unfortunately, with the amount of buyers I have, they're assigned to a multitude of agencies. And the buyer supervisor and I are good about getting our hands, in the nick of things with the buyers because we are short-staffed. So we're doing everything we can to process as it comes in. Of course, some requisitions come in more urgent than others, and so those are ones that I would take on I would assign a buyer. So right now, the assignment of the buyers it's working, but of course, it's not as quick as agencies would like, right? So we're working on our turnaround times. Compared to last FY, our turnaround times have really improved. I do have a little bit of data that I'll speak to. So right now, we're only in the 3rd quarter of the FY, and we have actually reached 60% of FY25's volume right now. Of course, when things happen, like an emergency, things have to not stop on the regular procurement, but I have to be able to juggle both. And so we've done that well with the amount of resources we have. But of course, I don't want to burn out the staff. And so a lot of what HR hears from me is I need at least more buyer 1s. I'm grateful that we do have a buyer 2 out. So we have reached about 60% of FY25's number, and we're not even close to the end of the FY. And so with that, I'm working on assigning staff, working with them, and hoping to bring in a couple of more buyer ones at least for the time being, and hopefully a buyer two. There's other things that GSA does. We do have records management. We do have surplus. We also have TENDA, the government store. And so those are areas that are very, very critical as well. And so I just try to divide the time and work with the staff I currently have. So it's really, GSA success is really the staff. It's not me. I'm just the person in front of it, but I couldn't do it without the staff being dedicated, and I work well with them and I communicate with them about things that we can do. A lot of things that we do currently is we have roundtable discussions on what efficiencies we can do this FY that we weren't able to tackle last fiscal year. So I think that's all I'll say right now. I hope
Andy,
that
you're
answered your
acting,
question.
so are you planning on staying, have you applied?
Right now it's in the process, so I'll just let the HR process work itself out on that. So I
Andy,
know
how
that
many
it
buyers
closed.
do you need right now? You have 4. How many do you really
Yeah,
need?
So we're trying to get at least up to 3 more buyer ones, and if I could get 1 buyer 2, depending on the workload. I'm trying to train the buyer 2s to do more of the analytical work that comes with procurement, because like I've said in the past, I don't rubber stamp what comes in. I still have to analyze the needs of the agency to make sure what they're spelling out in the specifications is truly going to meet their need. And so I want the buyer 2s to really hone in on that aspect of procurement and not just do regular procurement processing.
And is that included, Mr. Byrne, in your request for additional employees?
Yes, ma'am.
So you have asked for that budget, that additional 700,000 budget is to include for GSA employees?
Yes. And could I add to what Andy just was talking about, specifications? You would be amazed at some of the specifications we get. We get some that are pages and pages long, and therefore almost impossible to procure because they're so specific. And sometimes we get one that's just a few sentences, and it's hard to interpret what the agency actually wants. So we need to train agencies in how to compile specifications. That will save a whole lot of time and toing and froing that goes on. So that's one of the tasks that we obviously have to get GSA to understand first, and then the relevant and responsible personnel in procuring agencies.
Well, and definitely, we are finding, just a real hurdle, when it comes to procurement. I mean, we're seeing it every day. I get calls from my office asking that this is the delay. We can't spend our money in time. There seems to be lapses, but we all realize that in procurement, you have to have the money, first. In order to acquisition anything, you have to prove there's money. So this is an area in DOA that really needs some help because it could, well, let's go. I'm going to move on. I'm not going to elaborate on that, but I hope she gets the job. She's doing an excellent job. Excellent job. I saw her over at Homeland Security after the typhoon, just a day after typhoon, already sitting there all day long to get these emergency procurements through. So thank you so much, Andy, for all your hard work. And we are working on the modules. The other question is, do we have any liabilities, Director Burns, in the government of Guam with respect to FY2025?
Liabilities of what type?
There's always bills that were never, money that was ever, when we appropriate, right?
I see.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at our fiscal 24 balance sheet, there are some liabilities, accrued liabilities on there. Not all of them materialize, but many of them do. And one of the ones that we did include in the fiscal 24 financials was the excess gasoline revenues that need to be paid back to, or paid over to the airport. We are looking at this pretty carefully. In fact, we were looking at it last week. The budget wording is really hard to interpret, and not surprisingly, members of the administration have come out with different interpretations. But we are aware that 9.3 million, and you see it in the CRER, does need to be dispersed to the airport.
Can you talk to me about the warehouse in PD and the damage, and what are you doing to fix it?
Again, Andy is right on top of that.
I've been working with the staff, maybe to give you an update from our oversight. We were able to work with DOA's property site manager and the director and the deputy to see a warehouse in Dedido. And so I'm hoping that that will close soon so that I can shift my warehouse staff a lot closer to us in ITC and in a safer work environment. So I am working closely with the property site manager on this.
What's your timeline?
So when we went to visit, it was 30 to 60 days, and so we're at the 30-day mark. I did ask for an update, and he's working on getting that to me.
So maybe in 30 days you'll be able to get in there?
I really do hope so, for the staff's sake. Yeah.
Yeah,
For the safety of the staff.
It's a building that really should be condemned. Yeah, yes. Yeah.
Can you tell me about vendor payables? What is the update?
The update is that we pay vendor payables, within the 30 days when everything is absolutely clean and clear from the submitting agencies. I'll ask the CFO to address this too, but within the financial system, we have a process called Xflow, which means that if there's a encumbrance in the system, a PO or other encumbrance, the agency enters the invoice into the system and it matches up against that encumbrance. So we don't have to do a whole lot of additional work associated with invoice validation, because you can actually see both the PO and the invoice on the same screen. So we encourage agencies to do that, but in order to use it to its utmost, the agency must follow the encumbrance process. Otherwise, it becomes a payment that we have to pay through the old type of system where we have to investigate invoices. Do you want to add anything to that?
Sorry, I don't have the numbers year to date, but I do have the numbers of what we've paid, which we spoke about. We did improve our over 60 and 90 days prior to the typhoon. That has impacted a little, and so when we went back after the typhoon, we were able to bring it back up to our normal, which sits at roughly about 2.5% is our over 90 days, and about 6% of our payables is between 60 and 90, and the rest are within the 30 days. So I don't have the actual numbers with me today, but the results of the typhoon has impacted, but we've been able to turn that around and reduce our outstanding payables. And we were focusing when we went back on the individual payments, the stipends, the child support payments, and all of the individual payments. We also were asked to proceed with the COLA payments, which was also followed up by multiple agencies and some senators' offices. So we were able to also process those after the typhoon. So we're managing our payables. We've improved the turnaround time with the engagement of the agencies. We are continuing to provide trainings on the use of the system that they have access to enable them to upload the invoices. And they're also very good in holding us to account by contacting us and escalating to the leaders if there's a queue that hasn't been cleared over a day or two. So compared to last year, we've improved the turnaround time, but the influx of invoices continues, and as services are increased. So I hope that, I don't have the actual data, but I should be able to forward that to you when I get back to the office.
When I got to DOA, I think value of payables of something like 41 million. The last time I looked, excluding the appropriations to government departments, it was like 4 million. Generally, for local funds, we can get these out pretty quickly because the association is clear. Sometimes with federal funds, because of confusion between agencies' access to some of these federal funds, it sometimes takes a little longer. But we're aware, I mean, we see a pattern. You know, if you pay this vendor in January, it's more than likely you're going to have this vendor to pay in February. We have a system of GPA and GWA sending their invoices directly to us so that we know what power and water invoices that we have to pay. And we also have a large number of leases that we're working on because they're holdover leases, but we know we have to pay them every month. So we look out for them and enter them as soon as they're submitted.
My last question, with regards to a bill that was passed, Bill 46-38, this has to do with the Cancer Trust Fund and making sure they get their allotment. So I guess, Therese, can you tell me if the Cancer Trust Fund is up to date with their allotments? Because the bill actually, even though it's trailing about $386,000 lower, they are still supposed to get their allotment for the Cancer Trust Fund regardless, and the ability for you to use unexpended excess revenue to cover those costs. Are we up to date with them?
I will have to double check, but I believe they have been up to date. I will need to reconfirm. I'm texting someone right now to reconfirm before the end of the hearing. I should have that information to you.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. We worked hard on that, and it gives the DOA authority to, use excess revenue to make sure that they get their allotment. Other than that, I wish you guys the very best. I mean, your agency as well as the legislature, we work hand in hand together, and that's what we need to start doing, is start working together to address some of the issues. And Mr. Burns, the audit, it's one of the biggest issues that we have in the government, not having it on time so that we can do our job. So let's see what we can do to work on that. GSA, Mr. Burns, please, put more effort into GSA, because that's one of the biggest complaints I get, from agencies calling me. And lastly, maintain that cybersecurity in your agency, because that's a lot of bad actors out there. That's how they're going to do it, to try and take money these days. It's not a robbery. It's going into the internet makes it easy. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Ms. Mossy, Senator, just real quick, we can get you some legal clarification on the Budget Act, but do you have a current fund balance for 2024 fiscal year? Ed, is there a current fund balance?
A fund balance for fiscal 24
Yes.
is in the audit. It's 40.5. The unassigned balance.
How much is it then? Since you should know
40.5
it.
million.
Okay, what's that?
The fund balance reported in the fiscal 24 audit, unassigned balance is 40.5 million.
40.5.
For unassigned fund balance. The
Unassigned fund
the
balance.
fund balance, including all the assigned things, which are principally DOE, was 293 million.
So we'll get you clarification on the legal language that's in the current Budget Act. I'm pretty sure you can pay that airport vendor. Vice Speaker, you recognize.
Thank you, everyone, for being here this morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just probably just a couple of questions. I didn't have questions earlier, but Mr. Byrne, you said that you'll be requesting for 10 new staff positions. What exactly are these positions?
May I ask
Sure.
They're on this list, but I'll ask the deputy to
Well, we
respond.
can have that list. If we can get a copy of the list. Yeah.
Sorry, it's on the report, but we're looking at increasing one person in internal audit. We have 2 people there now, but the head of that audit is acting CPO right now. So we need 1 more person in that department. We need 5 more people in HR, as we attested. The good senator talked about our number of people. We We are we are doing for 2026, we have positions that we're going to fill within the next 60 days, but the 5 is we're asking for additional 5. And then in the insurance benefits, we're asking for 4. Since it's a department that needs insurance specialists and contract specialists that's going into all these contracts and negotiations and whatnot, so we need 4 more people in there.
So that's 10 right there.
Yeah. Oh, that's included, okay.
So the
Yes.
insurance specialist, that would be for the insurance. I don't see any for procurement, so procurement getting any new folks out of this 10 that is being requested?
So right now, we have vacancies for FY26, so we're trying to fill that.
How long have
before
you had
we-
those vacancies?
Maybe 2 years.
2 years, and we're still trying to fill it?
Well, the vacancies are there, but as, we
But
just,
the funding was there as well, right?
yes, but we promoted recently a bar 2 to supervisor, so then that opening becomes available and so forth, so.
Yeah, but that's been 2 years now that we've had vacancies in procurement. So I'm just a little bit puzzled. If we have vacancies in procurement for 2 years, how is it that we're not getting more people into procurement, knowing that we have a procurement backup?
Senator, another thing too is a buyer 1 slot is not, it doesn't pay that well, to be truthful. A lot of people you apply and there are not that many people that apply for buyer 1 positions.
What does a buyer 1 make?
Andy?
How much does a buyer 1 make?
It's under $20 right now for a buyer 1. Starting. Under $20 an hour starting.
Under $20, and what's the annual with benefits on that?
$32,000 is the annual for a buyer 1.
So 32,000, we can't find anyone that would be interested in 32,000 annually with benefits, right? We can't find anyone. When was the last time a announcement position was made? Or position announcement?
We actually have eligibility list right now. We're interviewing. We're scheduling interviews for our buyer 1, and we hope to get at least 2 buyer 1s out of that group. Okay, so it is being.
But this has been 2 years, and now we're just making a list now? Where are we at with the listing on the buyer 1?
So maybe I can speak to 2 years ago when we first put the buyer 1 out. We only had 1 person that wanted to come and work at GSA. And so through that process, we didn't, at least I'll speak for myself, I didn't feel like they were capable to do the procurement because of their background and the way they answered the questions. We had another opening last fiscal year, and so I believe that closed in September, and internally the discussions where we have a substantial long list that is on that. I'm just waiting for the certification packet so we could start the interview process.
Okay, I'll move on. I'm not gonna. I was looking at your budget digest, and on your office space rental, you're from FY26 authorized level of 522. Now for 2027, you're looking at 883,000. What was the increase there for the office budget, the office rental?
Our lease comes to an end, Senator, at ITC, and we're expecting, although of course with GSA's help, we're going to try and minimize the effect, but we're expecting a significant increase in the rent. Most of our neighbors around in ITC building are paying more rent than
So you guys are not locked into a contract?
It's
Is this a month-to-month or
It's a 3-year,
three-year contract, and that 3 years it's coming up?
yes.
When does it expire?
It expires in September.
Of this year?
I think so. Is that right? Yeah.
This year? Okay. And then on your utilities, power, water, and telephone, is this for ITC?
No.
No?
The rent includes the power and water at ITC.
Okay.
This is for PT mainly, and if we do abandon it, then we will obviously save some money on that.
So just power down at PD is 134,000?
Yes, because the air conditioning there is ancient to say the least, and you have to air condition a big space, and it's not a modern system. The warehouse that we're moving to is a modern system and should cost very much less.
Oh, okay.
So there is a possibility of a saving there.
Okay. And then on we were mentioning earlier on the procurement module, you said the team for, I guess the system is here on Guam. Is that going to cost anything additional for that procurement module, or is that part of the system?
It's part of the system, Senator.
It's part of the system?
Yes.
So how come we didn't implement this part of the system when we first got the new,
Well, they were all progressive, right?
Uh-huh.
We kept on adding modules, but can I ask the acting CPO, because she operates it every day, and we have more and more implemented, or integrated it, I should say.
okay,
Just like any new system, it has some kinks. In the beginning, it was just a procurement module that we had for GSA. And so right now, the additions are the surplus and the tender aspect of the procurement process. So throughout the time we've had the contract, we've implemented efficiencies in terms of the procurement, but the module we're working with the vendor now is on the surplus and the tender to make it not manual and to make it efficient, and everything drives to each other within the system. It all talks.
okay, I see. Thank you. And on recruitment, we were talking earlier, I guess, on the time that, I guess, when the system for recruitment is implemented, what would take 4 hours now will only take several minutes per application. Is that correct? So does that include, because I remember Mr. Guåhan earlier was mentioning that the security questions, things like that, does that include that as well, or how does that work?
No. So the security or the onboarding of law enforcement personnel is separate. That's not a part of the ongoing recruitment.
That's not part of the recruitment, right?
Correct.
Okay. So those will come from the agency itself.
Correct.
Okay. So how is it then the recruitment the recruitment process is taking it's such a long, tedious process for law enforcement to get their listing and get their people so they can start their training and get more folks out onto the streets?
So, well, we do open up the job announcement, some of them on a continuous basis. Currently, corrections is on a continuous basis. And so a big challenge as well is to wait for enough applicants to apply so that we can give the test, the written test, the physical test. And of course, in our experience, we do have more or less a preferable number of applicants that we'd like to wait for in order to go through the process of testing and selection. As an example, most recently we did a recruitment for one of the law enforcement. Out of the 300 applicants, only I believe 50 of them, don't quote me on that, but about 50 of them made it to the final stages. In other words, they passed the test, they passed the written, the physical, psychological background checks, and out of the 300 applicants, only 50 was able to make it to a final selection. So, of course, we'd like to provide the agencies with good quality applicants, as the director mentioned, and not just simply selecting from whoever applies. And so that also is a challenge.
Senator, I mentioned during my opening remarks that our priority is getting the right person in the right job, not just a person, the right person. And I personally am kind of focused on that because I've seen employees in other agencies recruited for one position and either forced is not the right word, but encouraged or required to fulfill the duties of another position. And all that does is create a dissatisfied employee. Law enforcement is not quite as bad in that because we have this kind of rigorous selection system going to it. But I really personally am concerned that we employ a government workforce that wants to do a job, enjoys doing a job, and is not there simply because they got recruited and then somebody found that that really wasn't what they should be doing. They should be doing something else. That's when we see requests for transfers to other agencies. That's when we see requests for transfers out of some agencies. So in law enforcement, as the PSA mentioned, we have a high dropout rate. At one time, there was some discussion, or well, should we reduce the barriers, the levels at which some of these tests and employees score in these tests. But I don't think that would have been a good decision. You know, we want capable law enforcement throughout the law enforcement agencies. You know, you can imagine what would happen if a policeman had to give evidence at a trial and they were unable to put together the evidence satisfactorily. So we want to make sure that that we do have a system that singles out those who are best suited to the job.
So, but does any communication go back to the agencies or departments that, you know, because DOC was sitting here not too long ago and they were mentioning that, you know, it's DOA is owning up the process for recruitment. Is there some type of communication that goes on between your department and the department that's requesting for recruits, and how is it done? Is there a paper trail that says, you know, we communicated with them and this is what it is, or is DOA just not speaking to the agencies?
Yes, I heard the new director say that. I mean, I don't think I necessarily agree. I think he said he wasn't really sure what was going on. But
it was Major Anton that knows.
Yeah, I see. Well, I heard the director talking. But I'll ask Mr. Hågan to comment.
Hi, so we do communicate with the departments, both indirectly and directly. So we do get requests, and more or less we collaborate with the departments behind the scenes, administratively amongst our administrative personnel. However, we do get and we must get an official request from the agencies to recruit. And most recently, we did get a couple of requests from corrections and the police department, as the director mentioned, for recruits and applicants to be processed. And so once we get the request, we go ahead and in turn put out the job announcement. We start scheduling the written tests, the physical tests, and all that's necessary to get them through the process. So yes, we do work directly with the departments.
Okay, that's great to hear. So when the new recruitment process for the new system comes on board, we'll be looking forward to a quicker response to the different departments and agencies.
We'd be happy to demonstrate the system to you when it's in operation, sir.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Mr. Byrne. Thank you to your team for being here this morning and for defending your budget requests. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Masi, Vice Speaker Ada. Senator Chalayi, you recognize?
Ms. Masi, thank you all, and thank you all for all of your work. I know DOA is really, as the director said, it's in the center of the entire government. You have to function well, or our entire government is going to slow down in so many ways. So I appreciated your comment, Mr. Byrne, your commentary in the beginning, your you have a lot of suggestions in there that what needs to be improved in order for the entire system to work better. I'm wondering, some of them you gave us very specific, for example, 5150, but some of them were a little bit more general, and I'm looking forward to more specifics, or if you are able to just issue circulars to the departments to do those things that you think that they need to do better. For example, the ambiguous specifications, that was one of them. I also think that's an issue. And what do you do when you have that problem? Are you able to discuss this with the directors themselves, or how do you see that being fixed?
Yes, thank you for that. It's a really good question. Thank you, Senator. I do discuss it with the directors themselves. But better still would be that their staffs understand what the effect of some of these ambiguous statements are and correct them before they even get to the director. Sometimes, in the enthusiasm to get a procurement done, especially if somebody finds they have funding or are awarded federal funding, the confusion arises because they dig out an old specification and think, oh, that's okay, and then when GSA tries to source that particular specification is no longer available. Or, we've had instances for heavy equipment, for instance, a specification for so many horsepower, but the standard is now a different number of horsepower. So that kind of procurement is automatically frustrated because of that kind of activity. Agencies are supposed, under the rules, to do diligent market research. And this is an area where we're also looking, that's one of the things we're looking at in new technology to help agencies with that. But the last thing, of course, we want is for GSA to try and source something that's just not there, or is no longer available in that form. So yes, but I also do talk to directors, especially if it's a large procurement where I know it's got a high public interest, and we do talk it through, but GSA does a really good job of doing that too.
All right, well, I appreciate that. I know this has been a perennial issue, not just with you, but with those before you, because I remember agencies would complain, our stuff is held up at GSA. GSA, when I asked, would say, oh no, we rejected those. They've been rejected and they have to start again. And so that's really a cause of some delay. So I hope that we can get that fixed. FY24 audit, based on that, now that it's out, are there any changes that you think are required in the FY27 budget?
That's another good question. I mean, the FY24 audit, I think we all have to, even in the best circumstances, the audit is always going to come out a year after, and even before you start to consider budgets. So my particular approach to this, as I was hinted at in what I was saying, is to have accurate, helpful interim financial statements, which are much better for guiding budgets or any other kind of spending and revenue plans. Specifically in fiscal 24, we've tried to include everything. I mentioned in response to Senator Title's question about the airport, the airport appropriation, basically, that's needed to pay them the money that they didn't get from the air fuel fund. But if you go within it, right, there are obviously things that we can do better as between the both of us. The page that I would like to direct people to is the budget actual expenditure, which I think is around about, it's right in the middle, around about page 151, and is the is a schedule that shows, the original budget, the updated budget, and the actual expenditure by major agencies. And the reasons behind the variances in there are things that we obviously look into, and I want to do that kind of schedule currently because it's more useful currently.
Yes.
But it does tell you which agencies overspent and which agencies underspent. But we do really have to address, please, all of us, the way we appropriate funds. I understand there are emergent circumstances that we have to address. But proper budgeting the budget should always come from expected or adjusted revenues. Other fund sources may be easy or may be necessary to access because of important things that happen, right? We had to send money to GMH because otherwise the hospital would have stopped functioning had we not sent those funds to them. And we had to dig into a prior year amount in order to do it. That is not good practice. That is not good budgeting practice. I understand that in emergency circumstances, it's something you choose to do, but it's not something that we should make a habit. I always remind people that the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, thinks that the appropriate amount to have in the general fund, untouched, is 2 months' worth of revenues and expenditures. So in our case, that would be round about 200 million. And at the moment, we're at 40 million in the fiscal 24 audit. Now, we do have a rainy day fund, and that's a good thing, and investors congratulate us for having a rainy day fund, but there really is no good alternative but for having a healthy fund balance in your general fund.
All right, you told us what that once before, that we should leave a healthy fund balance in there, but then we also, I think from a bill that was sent down, spent 40 million from the general fund balance for GMH again. What is this 41.5 million unassigned fund balance for FY24? What is the practical implication of that?
Well, unfortunately, right, there's a that's why I ask you senators to look at that other schedule, because the other schedule shows like a 15 million deficit, because the fund balance only reflects revenues and expenditures. It doesn't include future appropriations, and it doesn't include encumbrances. It's an accounting number. So that's why I encourage everyone to look at that budget schedule.
All right, so you wouldn't say that there's 41 available for expenditure? Those appropriations are still valid?
Well, a lot of that has been spent.
That's what I mean.
Because we did spend it on the hospital,
okay,
and other necessary cases.
All right. So the agencies, we've talked about this a little bit this morning, the agencies that are coming in here for their budgets are telling us they're unable to spend. I'm glad you're giving them a schedule now of what they're spending. That's excellent. They're still saying they're not able to spend these things because either procurement's too long or hiring's too long. Those are the two biggest complaints. So we've talked about hiring. I want to talk about, you mentioned that you're doing some salary studies. Can we get the list of what your priorities are in these salary studies that you're doing? What can we expect before the end of the year? In which positions are going to be studied?
So as I mentioned, we do have in hand a revised law enforcement salary study. I also like to note that all the different work groups have been renewed. That includes the teachers, the nurses, of course, law enforcement, and the general pay plan, which is all the administrative folks. So all those pay scales associated with those work groups have to be studied within more or less 3 years. So that's the goal. And so we are on track. In fact, like I mentioned earlier, we're actually early with GPD. We're on track with law enforcement. We've already done the nurses. Of course, there's the GPP, the
what?
The general pay plan, which is the administrative folks.
Are you going to do that again before the end of the year?
Well, I don't want to say that we are going to do it at the end of the year, but we are actually currently putting together the numbers. We are putting together the numbers, and as well as started preliminary work on that scale to include the teachers as well as the attorneys.
What was the last one?
Attorneys.
Attorneys.
Correct.
So all of these you're currently studying, and it's possible you're going to submit something before the end of the year, or reclassify them or readjust their salaries?
Well, again, we are putting together numbers. We're gathering information as we speak for all of those particular scales. Again, they are on a schedule. They have been renewed at a certain time, and so to meet the 3-year threshold, we are trying to get ahead of it and put together information so that if we do put together a final study, we'll be ready for that.
All right,
As far as which priority, I would go ahead and defer to my director.
Well, you said they're on a schedule, so which comes first? I want to know which ones are due by the November, by which ones are due by December.
I don't have those dates with me right now, but I will tell you, though, that the law enforcement, the nurses, and of course the general pay plan as well as the teachers, those are definitely
All due this year.
more or less.
You're saying the 3 years expires this year.
Correct. Yeah, more or less.
And the governor will make the ultimate decision as to whether to actually implement those after the studies are done?
Yes, we would like to work obviously with the legislature, because in order for the studies to be effective, there have to be funds available to meet those. If there's an increase, obviously there needs to be funds available to meet those increases.
All right, and none of those increases was anticipated in FY27 budget requests, correct?
That I don't know. I think you have to ask. I'll ask my colleague at BBMR.
All right, and then, okay. If there is a time schedule, I'd like to see a copy of that. And so then the procurement, back to that just for a little bit. I'm glad to hear about the announcement being out. Does DOA monitor contracts? For example, we procure something by contract. Do you monitor the deliverables? Do you monitor when these contracts expire? Are you managing those contracts, or are we leaving it to the agencies? Because we've seen some errors. And of course, we saw a big one with DRT, letting that contract expire, all of us getting offline, and we're still suffering from that. So yeah, if you could speak to that.
So this fiscal year, the contracts registration moved from the Division of Accounts to GSA, so that's an extra leg as part of the...
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sorry, let me just move this. Contract registrations, they are with GSA now. We are responsible for that. When it comes to contracts that we have procured, we have implemented this fiscal year tracking, especially if we know that it's going to be a recurring use for an agency. So if it's a lease, the ones that we know are services. However, when it is a procurement of an item, like a one-time delivery, we don't track that, because that's the responsibility of the end user to ensure that the vendor delivers the items to them within that required delivery deadline. And so once they're responsible for receiving the goods and signing the receiving report, that they then submit to accounting to pay the invoices. To speak to the DRT issue, that's not a recurring contract. It's a sole source procurement, because back before my time, they had procured the system. And so the responsibility of submitting the documentation so that we can get these contracts to the agencies on time so that things like what DRT experience doesn't happen, that's the responsibility of the agency. They need to make sure that they certify funds for us to procure for them. And so once those get submitted through the GFMIS, then we would process it as it comes in.
Yeah, I just feel like with the turnover of directors and different things, and yeah, it's really a big risk that the government is running by not monitoring all of those things closely, even quality control. What are we getting for our money? I'm very concerned about that. We've got consultants out there that I'm not sure what really the deliverables or where to find them.
I share some of your concerns. I mean, that was one of the reasons why we moved the contract management to GSA, because they're better equipped to do some of those tasks, and we will get them done.
I'm glad. And then procure them in advance of the expiration, right? Renewal. What about the self-insurance? Is there an audit done of that?
Yes. We're currently in discussions with the auditors because it was included in the audit. There's a separate statement in the audit because they're a proprietary fund. The auditors feel that they did a lot of work on that fund in order to include it in the audited statements. So I think it's their view, and I tend to agree with them, that we effectively have done an audit. I'm not sure the public auditor shares that view because he seems keen to have a separate audit done.
What about a claims report? Can we see that? Where would we find that?
Actually, it is reported to the legislature.
The monthly?
The monthly report,
Right.
yes.
Do you have one like a cumulative that we can see, that more detailed? That one is so, the one I saw in June, I guess, was so vague. Yeah.
Well, yes, of course, providing there's no personal information, we could give you any report, but what detail would you like to see?
Well, I just think we should see the claims that are being covered under the contract, any claims that are being covered kind of by exception to the contract, and what types of claims, of course, in detail are being covered. Are you expecting any changes in the upcoming procurement for health insurance, like coverage, for example?
Well, yes, we are, because we're trying to procure the pharmacy benefit managers separately, because we believe that's a path to reducing pharmaceutical costs. In other respects, generally we followed the benefit schedules that the TPA issues because it's easier for them. And to be fair, the TPAs have pretty good benefit schedules. If we try and go outside that, then it's confusing for them and it's confusing for us. Now, you're absolutely right. There have been occasions when the TPA has said that's outside our normal benefit standard, but the governor has decided that that is a case where we need to attend to an urgent medical issue. It's a life and death issue, and we have done so, but it's very, very rare.
Yeah, I'd just like to see if there's a trend in those things. How are those reported? How can we see that? Like, for example, were we having an issue with cancer medications not being covered, and did we have to make an exception for several people, or just on a case by case, and then the governor decides? I'd like to see a more policy-wide, like a policy put in place for those types of things.
Yes, again, cancer medications, sometimes the cancer medication is a new medication. It comes out, it's not on it's one of the things we talk to the bidders for the PBM. It's not on their formulary, not because of any expense issue, it's just a new drug that's not on their formulary. I think we've taken the view in a couple of cases over the last 3 years that administering the drug is going to be cheaper than a hospital admission. Even though these drugs are expensive, the highest expense is a hospital admission. and if we can avoid that, we should.
So you're doing that on a case-by-case basis?
Yes, and it's very, very rare. I mean, maybe 3, 4 a year.
Yeah, that's why I'd like to see a detailed report, just so we can also monitor that ourselves. And again, I want to just thank you all for the work you're doing. I think with the limited number of staff you have, particularly in procurement, it's really amazing that we're getting this much done. But we need to get a lot more done faster. And as you said, Mr. Byrne, there's a lot of training that needs to happen. So yeah, I'm just hoping that these issues that you're having with these agencies can really translate into improvements as opposed to just continued problems with, without some kind of I don't know how to enforce it. But Mr. Byrne, I'm hoping that before you leave, that your suggestions are going to become some type of mandate.
Yeah, the relationship with agencies are critical, and it shouldn't be, like I said, it shouldn't be a contest. It should be a cooperative matter. Unfortunately, like I said, compliance sometimes falls in the way of that, because if we say you can't do that because the rules say you can't do that, then agencies tend to find that they're not being singled out, and they're not being treated in any different way. We try and treat them all separately, but sometimes it's hard for them to accept that.
Mr. Chair, can I ask one more question?
Sure. This will be your last question.
Yes. So some of the agencies claim that they have certain positions that are very difficult to hire. And I don't know if they've tried the above step or they haven't, but they say that the specs need to be rewritten for these positions, right? But it sounds like you're doing these general studies, and but do we have any priority for those positions that they have determined to be very critical?
So, unfortunately, the 2,000-some job specifications that we currently have on the books are very outdated. We are doing our best with the limited staff that we have and the expertise, right, to be able to create these job specifications. I will say, though, that most notably, we just accomplished a few milestones, right, of updating these job specifications. Again, I mentioned earlier, Guam Police Department, we went through that milestone. We're very satisfied with the amendment of the PO2, PO3 positions. The OTEC positions, far overdue. We did a complete overhaul of all of those positions. We've greatly modernized the job specifications to meet the current needs, right, of technology and computers and systems. Now, of course, again, I mentioned there's about 2,000 job specifications. We are going through each one of them. In turn, of course, the ones that have the most impact and the ones that are being used. And we are, at the same time, not just updating, but we're abolishing, many job specifications that are, positions that are obsolete. As an example, those positions that require shorthand, right? I don't know if we're all familiar with shorthand, but we don't use shorthand anymore. So again, we are getting lots of requests. Law enforcement as well, right, to update the job specification. And we are tackling that challenge.
All right, thank you. Again, that's why I want to see the list of what you're prioritizing, because I want to see if it matches what the agencies say are their priorities versus somebody else's priorities. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Sure, absolutely, and that's one of the reasons why many of us also have been advocating, because a lot of times, and this is what we get of all the reports of the agencies we've been seeing and talking to on pre-budget meetings, their issue is not their budget. Their issue for retention is updating and making sure that they can hold on to these people. It's not a budgetary matter. They've got lapses in the millions. So if they could pay these positions to keep them, and even to recruit at what you're saying with some of the lower level, that's got to be the alacrity, is to get that done. Because it's even within the agencies, the capacity of the individuals to not lose them. It's not a budget problem. It's a problem that they're not being paid to the retention level. So Ed, a couple of questions for you. I was a little concerned. You mentioned that, of course, this is a policy call, and it's not policy yet on the multi-year for the health contract. Are you procuring for a multi-year even though you're not allowed by law at this point?
No.
Okay.
But may I ask Leo to
Please,
expand on
yeah, I just wanted to make sure because that seemed to have been heard by others, and so, yes.
Thank you, Senator. So at this point, we are not procuring because the statute does require an annual. So the hope is that we are able to change statute to do a multi-year contracting.
Okay, thank you. That's important. Okay, so there was also when DOC came, they talked about a decision that was made to ensure DOC detainees. So just trying to understand the authority for that. How did you execute that, Ed? And then a couple follow-ups in terms of how that benefits are being afforded.
You will be aware, Senator, that DOC incurred a lot of medical bills, and I think they mentioned this also, a lot of medical bills in respect to prior years that we're still trying to pay off. So we engaged with them, and this was agreed within the administration by the governor. We agreed to include them in the medical plan. But there are certain exceptions, right? They told us that they had a very good contract for renal dialysis. So we didn't try and override that. We let them continue with their renal dialysis contract. If one of the things that was really, really important that we kind of want to make sure is that if a inmate is actually in a hospital as an inpatient, we should be able to make a Medicaid claim. So this whole package was put together where they have a contract with the hospital for their day-to-day medical treatment, but for actual going to the hospital for outpatient treatment, which isn't subject to Medicaid, and other providers, we included them in the plan in order to avoid these prior year charges that providers were complaining to us about not being paid.
Certainly. Is it a blanket approach, or how many detainees do you currently have then under the program?
Any detainee there is covered for the period that they're there, so it's like 800 people.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to get some details on the program because when DOC was here, we kind of we're interested in how this is going. Yeah. So then there's not kind of a funny question maybe, but so there's not an employee share. You just
no, it's not an
the
employee
okay.
share, but it's a reduced amount because of the exceptions that I just mentioned.
Okay. So another question that came up. So with the FMIS, I know that we went over before the procurement and the amount and everything else. The thing that seems to come out of the audit and a reoccurring issue is the additional modules and the requirement for it. So how many additional modules are we talking about that we need to add to the current system, and is there a budget in place for that?
Well, we're constantly, and maybe I'll ask the CFO to address this, but we're
Please.
constantly adding modules, just like you heard about the new module for recruitment and evaluations. We're constantly adding modules. But before I ask the CFO to speak, I want to be very clear that we've got an FMIS system. Feeding into the FMIS system are legacy type systems. I know Public Health told you that they were trying to modernize their system away from their legacy system because the way they feed into the new FMIS system requires a lot of intervention by the staff at accounting because they're not compatible, rather than being able to move straight into the system. We're also looking at integrating the tax receipt system, which at the moment is, to my mind, totally chaotic, and you have to put in receipts twice, once into one system and once into another. So that would be a module that we are looking at. We haven't actually contracted for that module yet. We're just investigating that one. The module that we're also trying to introduce this month, should be the end of the month, is the grants management system, which was part of the original concept, but always was going to be a later addition because we had to get that core accounting system working. And so that is hopefully coming in at the end of this month. Well, not hopefully, that's our plan, to get that working at the end of this month. So we're constantly looking at how better to integrate all these systems. And some are planned, some are actually in progress, like you heard with the HR systems. Do you have anything to add on that? No.
So I guess the follow-up then to that handles all the module and the like. Do you have this built into your budget for additional costs with regard to that?
At the bottom of the page of the request, there's the footnote. In addition to that, there's 3.5, about 4 million in the miscellaneous appropriation request for the ongoing operational costs for GFMIS plus license renewal. That's the only, that's in addition.
Right, then that's why we were asking as well, because it was in the miscellaneous. Okay, so we'll figure out how that will provide for the actual
and Senator, I hope that if we come across a need that we feel needs to be addressed, we can come to you and ask for the funding, similar to the way the legislature did, right, on the cyber funding.
We certainly will, and we certainly can. And I guess just one of my final questions that kind of puzzled me in terms of how we've been able to make payments from time to time. Was there an appropriation that was actually the finding in the 2023 audit for the establishment of the account to start the self-insurance, that $33 million that was populated in an account based on, I guess, DOA and the governor working together?
The self-funded insurance plan is within the statute.
But was there a specific line item appropriation for it?
No, because the revenues come from, they're included in the benefits in each agency, or for the component unit agencies like GPA, they make their own contribution.
So one of my points is I've seen a number of different non-appropriated items, particularly with excess revenue, when it comes to the final 60 days, 30 days in terms of transfer authority. And this is the point that I've been making from time to time, that it seems selective, that when we want to pay something, depending on the authority given within the budget, it's paid. And from time to time when it's not paid, subject to an appropriation, regardless of the fund availability. So we'll continue to discuss that as
we try to be consistent.
And we're thriving to ensure that happens as well. Just in closing, I want to make sure that there's no misunderstanding in terms of what this legislature's decision and what it's planning to embark on. In no way does it contemplate what our actions to be taken, that we have issues with the staff and their ability to do their job on a daily basis. And once again, Ed, you have provided your opening statement as part of your part of the record, correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And so we don't want to cross the wires here. Whatever we do going forward, the implication is to answer a very difficult and very important question, and that is disclaimer findings in the audit. That will include us talking to DOA and talking to the agencies to ensure that we can provide for the accountability of what's being discussed in the audit. I think that's just prudent, whether you accept it or not in terms of the procedure going forward. That's what will take place. But I've met with a number of folks who have called and asked to meet with me, and I have many more meetings that I'm going to be taking. And that is, individuals at the agency level are reaching out and saying that we want to discuss this with you. That's the process. That's the process I think we should be embarking on in order to get to the bottom of it, because some of it looks like, in terms of the ability to provide the information, and some of it looks like, There is no information. That's a problem. That's a problem that can be fixed and doesn't have to have an implication as to anybody doing anything wrong. But it certainly must have something contained within it, a procedural situation that is not working. If that's where we end up, then all of us benefit by being able to make sure that we close that gap. But to simply explain it away as audits are difficult and there's multi-billions of dollars involved, I'm okay with that. I understand it. That's been happening, since the iteration of our budgets and what we have to contend with. But, I look forward to cooperation. I look forward to all of us being able to get to the bottom of it. And if there's legislation or procedural issues that need to be changed, then so be it. Otherwise, if there's we've all faced that. So with that, I want to thank you all for being here today. And I want to once again say that this legislature as well appreciates the hard work of all the classified employees that watch administrations come and go on a yearly basis prior to the retirement, after they put all of the hard work in. And we believe that many do that job with honor and dignity and with all the energy that they have to put into it, most of them being career employees in the government. As I said, this looks like a relatively modest request. I don't think that we're going to have a problem achieving this. Even though you're currently tracking $300,000 in lapses, we believe that you'll be able to exhaust that within the fiscal year, the balance of time. We want to thank Department Administration, Director, Management, staff for coming down to defend your budget today. And at this time, the budget hearing for Department Administration is hereby adjourned. Jesus Masi.
Thank you for listening to us, Senator.